this is our last lecture of our course, and it's really happy for everybody to make it to this stage. And I hope you have learned a lot from all these previous lectures. And today we are going to be starting with global supply chain management. So why does a firm want to go global? Why does it want to be globalized? There are many reasons, although there can be many difficulties. So from the perspective of supply chain management, the goal of globalization is to maximize efficiency-driven and responsiveness-driven value, as we mentioned firstly in our lecture 1, on a global scale. And also we have to be sure of how our goal is also to minimize mismatch between demand and supply on a global scale. So now our goals are bigger, our goals are harder to achieve, our goals may be more risky, or maybe you say you diversify so you can reduce your risk. Globalization, in many different debates, some people believe it's risky, some people don't, because you diversify. Well, one country fails, the other department in different country may still be making profits, but this usually applies to a large conglomerates. And for small businesses, globalization can be a pretty long and daunting process. They have to undergo certain expansions in order to reach this globalization stage. By spreading the value chain activities throughout the global market optimally. So remember in lecture 6 we talked about structural dimension and infrastructural dimension. So these are two important categories of the elements including supply chain management, and you have to optimally manage and strategize these elements inside your structural dimensions, those computer hardware, inventories, configuration, production, matching, logistics, as well as your infrastructure dimension, communication, coordination, motivation, work ethics, partnering, reliability, dependability. These are pretty important in an infrastructure dimension point of view. And now globalization has many processes. Globalization has different points, different periods. So first of all, we have a pre-entry point. So in the pre-entry point, we are determining our motivation to go globalized. You should have certain motivations in order to make this decision to eventually go globalized, make your business go globalized. And the reasons, for example, are market saturation, attractiveness, and it can be competitive reaction. Moreover, it can also be efficiency, risk diversification, I mentioned before, and learning, innovation. So when you are still not entering the globalization framework and you think you're able to, your scale, your capability is able to handle globalization, you now should think about, is it worth it? And what are reasons to go globalized? What am I aiming for? And then you need to think more detailedly as well during this pre-entry period in terms of who are your target customers, how are you going to find a joint partner in a local economy, in a local cities, another country. You also have to examine the market pretty closely, because this can be the reason for globalization, but not all global markets reach this. You have to find the nation, you have to examine its economic conditions, examine the market, focus on your specific product or service, your good or service inside the country you want to globalize to or you're planning to do. So you can do more of an examination analysis. You can also do some cause and effect. If I do this, what will happen? If I sell this, what is the chance of making profit? If I find this partner, what is the chances of a diversification? Blah, blah, blah. So how do I coordinate? This is still a pretty good question as well. So in the pre-entry period, you'll be thinking of why you want to go globalize. Afterwards, you go to the entry period, and in the entry period, you're basically making commitments, resource commitments. So in this point of view, now you are actually committing and putting all your resources into starting a business in the globalization, in a globalized nation, in another country. So after you go to a target country, one problem you can find is cultural differences. Cultural differences is not the culture we talk about in school, not the basic costume culture, not the food culture, but when you go globalized, you have to be careful of the corporate culture as a whole inside the country. I'm a Chinese, and I believe if you're not born in China, it's pretty hard for you to do business in China. It's to be honest, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard but for Apple, it's definitely a different thing. But it is hard to expand your business to China. You have to get to this China's Chinese business ethics. You have to understand how Chinese people use resources, how they coordinate. Are they willing to coordinate with you? They may willing to coordinate with local partners, but if you're overseas partner, are you going to work well with them? And be careful, these local business partners, if you're finding a joint venture, if you want to do a merger or something, or you just simply need some coordination, which is what all businesses need in the supply chain, you should be careful. They may be cheating on you because they may take some advantages of you. And sometimes you don't know the games in the nation. I talk about game, like the computer game. Every country has in these businesses have its own games, has its own sequences. So those people who matured, who maybe born there and started business in their 20s and now about 40, 50, they are those who are experienced. They know how to play the game. So two advices for you: first of all, be careful of the cultural difference, think carefully, considerably before going globalized. And secondly, since I mentioned the differences, you should find a reliable partner, or I think it's better to find a partner who understands your market as well. Maybe some overseas Chinese if you want to go to the Chinese market. If you are American company, if you find a Chinese American who is doing business in China, it is more likely you can get a balance. Or if you are finding a partner who is reliable, who is okay, satisfactory, while she has any experiences doing business abroad, or she's even you can check about graduation, although it might not be so relevant, but you can also check about whether they studied in overseas. So you guys will be more easier to be coordinated. This is more about cultural, psychological distances, because the cultural difference is both psychological and physical distance. When there's physical distance, it creates psychological distances, because you have different games, you have different work ethics, you have different culture. It's not only corporate culture within your company, it is a culture, the atmosphere of doing business as a whole in another country may be largely different from your country. So take more considerations and try to find a reliable partner and try to understand the market yourself. I've actually know a lot of people who, although they are not born in this native country, they can go pretty successful even as a small or medium-sized business when they are expanding their business to another country. They may not speak the language very well, but although your understanding of the country is still going to be different to this understanding of the locals, because locals are born in this country, they have their value developed in this country. But if you are willing to study, you're willing to put efforts before you globalize, or after you globalize, maybe you are expanding, doing business in China, if you're willing to study the market carefully, analyze the market carefully, examine and put in your effort, I believe even as a foreigner, as a foreign business owner, manager, coordinator, agent, you're able to expand your business well, and at least you are going to understand the market well. So I mentioned just now the culture difference can be damaging, can be fatal for your business. Well, it is also possible for you to resolve this difference and actually go well in the country. But I'm talking little bit about some extensions. You have to examine and analyze the political conditions, because political conditions link to the economics, it links to your authorities, your rights. Moreover, it also links to about in terms of how's the economy going on in this country, because different political systems may have a different spending habits of the customer, different production habit, because some socialist nations have a kind of a more of a government managed production. So you have to make sure you understand this before and try to examine the conditions, economic conditions of these countries in a deeper phase, not only in the cover, but you actually have to go quite deep, like a university research, do something like that, like confirm and collaborate, talk to others, not only doing solo research, do some group research, do research with your employees. Maybe you have an international department, globalization department. Also talk to some local, try to find some friends from the country you want to globalize to, and discuss with some experts to find out these differences, to find out the economic conditions, find out the rules of the games and these regulations in the country you want to globalize to. And then it's about coordination and configuration. So configuration is a part of our structural dimension. So it is part of our computer hardware, and coordination is a part of our implicit factor, which is a part of our infrastructural dimension, that is a part of our computer software. You have to combine computer hardware and software and kind of develop a good computer as a whole inside the country you want to globalize to in order to achieve efficiency. So this is something you have to take account of. Configuration in terms of the geographical locations, how are you going to coordinate between configurations in different parts? Because once you want to start a business like in China, South Korea, maybe Europe, you have to manage different parties inside this country. Because you're not only going to have a supplier, you also have something like a distributor, like a manufacturer, logistic companies, third-party delivery companies, and platforms, maybe e-commerce platforms, selling platforms, maybe government agencies, registration agencies for businesses, something like that. You have to coordinate between this. So again, it links to our what I just talked just now. Examine, understand the regulations in the country you want to globalize. Moreover, post-entry. Now, post-entry, after you enter, you are kind of stable, you don't want to exit just now. Now you have to think about growth or expansion. Since you believe it is still stable for you, that it means it may have some potential. If you believe the market has certain potential in the future, do it. Try some growth and expansion strategies. And there are 3 S I want to talk to you right now. There are scale, scope, and speed. So scale is your kind of how big is your business in the globalization, how many employees, how much products you're selling, what is kind of a cost you're putting, what is basically average profits you're earning, average revenues you're generating. And then it's about the scope. How much services are you covering? Is it only one city? Is it across many cities? What's the population of the customers? So it is possibly linked to scale, and speed is your efficiency. Are you producing fast? In terms of globalization, are you connecting well between different countries? Because globalization doesn't only mean like I'm now in US, now I'm doing my business, the whole thing in China. So globalization means you are kind of doing business in the country, but you still have to coordinate and manage efficiency between many countries. So for example, I'm an American company. If I want to do in London, I want to do my business in London, I have to maybe coordinate my production. When production may be in China, maybe in China's Zhejiang province, and they are going to produce our product and have to coordinate this process between the transporting from China into our United Kingdom, and how United Kingdom can communicate to us and coordinate with our headquarters in the United States, for example in New York. So these are pretty important for you to know, efficiency and coordination. Then I don't want to talk more about corporate culture, DNA, because I think I was covering both corporate culture and DNA from the culture difference. So corporate culture, you want to examine corporate culture as a whole, because you're going to collaborate with some joint ventures, but you have to understand the corporate culture in terms of the industry, in terms of all business in the nation, in the country you want to globalize to. DNA, I talked just now, the games, the rules, the values of how business are done, how in a different country, to find out their DNA. Is it hard? Is it possible for you to decode this DNA? No, it's impossible. For example, I'm a Chinese. Even if I go to Spain, I may live in Spain pretty well, but I still won't have the DNA of the Spanish people in terms of physical, in terms of psychological and physiological. So in terms of my body, of course, I'm not a Spanish. I'm just a Chinese descent, a Chinese ethnic group. Even psychologically, even if I live in Spain for 20 years, psychologically, I might be close to Spanish people, but I'm still not going to decode the complete DNA, because they grew up in the country, they grew up with Spanish families, they made with Spanish friends, and compared to me who went to Spain maybe after university, it's still quite different for us. It is there are a lot of differences between. So definitely you are not able to decode the DNA, but does it mean you're not going to be successful? No, you don't have to be exactly like Spanish businessmen in terms to be success in the Spanish market. So but these are some things you have to consider, because you actually can make a lot of losses. You can actually be cheated, actually cheated, yeah, if you are globalized and you are not incorporating well, infusing well with the DNA. And the same here for localization. It is advised to find a joint venture. So when you are working in the local environment, you're able to kind of work well with someone who knows the market, and you try to make your company local as possible, because you will have to do employment in the country. So in this case, I don't think as a manager, if you're a top manager who is not in charge of the globalization market, who is like just giving strategies and management, and I hope you should employ someone to manage who is kind of a Chinese American-ish. I don't mean by the nationality must be American, but his ethnicity must be Chinese. I mean like someone, for example, I'm American, I want to do my business in China. I want to find someone who is able to balance both, who have knowledge to both market. So maybe the person is American who live in China for a long time, who has been doing business in China. All the opposite line is also possible. You can find a Chinese partner or someone from other nationality who know the market very well and know the American market very well where you are working as well. So localization, you should first find a kind of a local partner, or just employ a local manager who is in charge of your business. So that guy, that person, that guy or female, that manager there will then be able to coordinate with other businesses, and you should delegate responsibility tasks to this particular person who will be able to make contacts and help to localize your business. And they may help you with employing human resources and building up your infrastructure, systematic, technological, departmental, and human resources aspect infrastructure inside your business. Okay. Now, when you exist, when you believe that, oh, it's fine, I think there's too much opportunity cost, there's a better market out there, or I'm making too much losses, I would just want to kind of stop making business here, want to just be more stable. Yes, then you have to exist. Many successful businesses, they have existed in many global markets. Okay, for example, Bridgewater Fund is a hedge fund company founded by Ray Dalio, and Ray Dalio once did business in China. And after China, actually, he did business in China while he was actually also managing the American hedge fund Bridgewater business at the same time. But then he found out China was not his cake, was not his business, isn't suitable for him, not able to make money for him, very fatigued, and was like kind of paying too much but not earning too much in return. So then he stopped the Chinese market, focused on this American, maybe European market, and Rio Dalio now is a billionaire. So doesn't mean you don't have to exist. Sometimes exist is much better for you in terms of your cash flow, in terms of your money you hold. So and it also decreases your opportunity cost, which is a lose you made from an alternative option. So you can kind of enter another globalized market or expand your market in your own country. So in this, you try to find new market opportunity and strategic trade-off, resource opportunity cost. Because when you implementing too much opportunity resources, you now first have to consider whether my revenues are not able to cover the cost. If not, you are not making profit. You're making losses. It's pretty bad. It depends anyway. And secondly, if you are making profit but you believe it's too little, there's some better market out here, want to give it a try, then you follow the cycle again, starting from pre-entry examinations to entry, post-entry, then possible exit or continuation. So now let's talk about the globalization process. So when you enter the market, you have to globalization history. You have to have the motivation, understand the history of the market, understand whether your past assets, like the assets you hold, are able to cover the cost. Then you should also then discuss about. I would say you should talk about motivation. You should think about what's your motivation. Sorry for it's a bit wordy just now. What's your motivation, and then administrative heritage. Do you have enough kind of money to go globalize? Usually business who are holding cash, who are holding enough profit, are going to globalize. Otherwise you should just be stable in your little spot, so you're not going to go bankrupt or illiquidify in pretty short amount of time. Then when entry, or also moreover structural factors, you should design your configuration and know-how coordination, and the operations point of view, you should define your supply chain management, global supply chain management design. So you design how you're going to do, how you're going to connect between maybe your product producer, supplier are in a different country, and maybe you have certain you have to connect to your headquarters and so on and so forth. So you have to make sure you understand this. Now talk about the global entry, initiation entry into the global market. Then you have to understand this. There are cultural, economic, and political distances. You have to strategize this, try to reduce this, and try to understand this by learning. As we mentioned, learning capability in lecture 3, I hope it creates an impression for you that learning is pretty crucial for supply chain management and for business activities, or for even lifelong process. This is a lifelong process. For all aspects of your life, learning must continue. Moreover, forming strategies, aliases, joint venture, JV, joint venture. You'll find someone who is expert, or employ someone who is expert in the country, and find a dependable partner or someone who is also know your market well to coordinate with him or her with their businesses, to try reduce these distances and try to make profits and don't make too much losses due to the fact that you are entering a market that is not your business, that is not the country of origin. Now also acquisition as well, then implementing configuration and coordination. Okay. And now this is operation. Our operation is implementation. Okay, after post-entry, think about expansion, management strategies, and we also, in this case, it's more bit complicated. We have to think about improving our global situation, supply chain management, and also think about flexibility and controllability. Which one am I improving now? If your product has been sold stably, you have a good customer reputation, you might be thinking about efficiency. But if the countries kind of have this quick popularity, and the customer taste change pretty fast, mismatch happens fast, especially on your product, on your industry. Now you should consider about flexibility, because that will be the thing you have to work on. But you definitely have to balance both, because while you're investing in flexibility, you have to make sure you have not enough money to stay on in the market to survive. And when you increase efficiency, try to make sure don't incur future potential external cost when your product is not welcome, when your product is not sold, when your product cannot help you to cover your cost once it's launched in the market. And in the global restructure transition, you can have a transition strategy to transit to a new market, have a kind of a new generation. Your business have a new generation in another country. And look at this arrow down here, overreaching theoretical foundations. So learning propensity model, remember the model we talked about? Learning propensity, don't care about the word propensity, it basically means inclination. Propensity model is a process of determining your factors, implement the factors, implement strategies, coordination, then realize effectiveness, and reinforce this cycle. So that's pretty much about propensity model. It's basically the process of learning, determine first, then implement, then reflect. and continue reinforce. So that's about the learning propensity model. You may not remember from our previous lecture in lecture 3, learning capability, but it's pretty good. It's okay. It's fine for you guys. Learning propensity model is, you don't have to memorize it, but just to tell you that you try to basically you have to be a learning organization that acquires, applies knowledge and reflects knowledge for new insights. Okay. You should also conduct market-based learning and risk containment analysis. You don't have to know this containment thing looks quite wordy, quite hard. Risk containment analysis, basically analysis on your risk. How much risk are there in this global market? How can I reduce the risk? Is it stable market or not? So we think about this, and then it's our transition. Okay, now, so this is our globalization dynamic process diagram. Let me make this smaller. Try to reduce the size. I'm able to do this. I think I'm okay. Yeah, I'm able to do this. Okay, now I think it's a good size for you guys. First of all, we have determining factors. This is also the same thing that I think the orders, the processes are the same for the learning propensity model. I mentioned you don't have to memorize this now. For the diagram, you don't have to exactly memorize what is it, but you have to get the meaning behind it. First of all, we will have our determining factors. For example, our organizational capability, our resources, top management well. After this, we'll enforce our strategy, and we'll try to increase our capacity, and then we'll perceive the effectiveness. How effective is our product? If it's not effective, let's go back again. If it is effective, if it succeeds, we realize effectiveness, and we try to reinforce this process. However, when you implement a global strategy, you also should think about competitive advantages as well, which is your competitive position in the domestic market. So this is about the dynamic process. Okay, so we'll continue our discussion. Oh, sorry, let's just finish this slide. So this is the first section. Okay, so how fast to globalize? This diagram is pretty straightforward. The x-axis is time, y-axis is relative level. You basically want to tell you that you should have the scale and scope relative to the managerial capability you have. So at this point of time, at this point you have a higher managerial capability compared to your physical capacity, which is a stable point of view. But then it means you don't have a high capacity, you are not making too much money as well, and you are kind of wasting your talent. You are able to manage, you have the employees, you have this amount of employees who are able to manage this amount, but you only have this amount. So here is like you have a mismatch between physical capacity and managerial capability. This mismatch is not dangerous, but you are kind of not making money, so it can be quite dangerous. But now, most danger points here. Now you have a mismatch here. Now the physical capacity is larger than managerial capability. That means you are holding the capacity, you are continuing production, you are holding inventories, you are kind of operating a lot of productions, while you don't have certain managerial capability. This capability may not be this implicit capability, such as your management skill is not up there. That would be kind of okay, but this mostly relate to how much employee. Sorry, it basically means, are you able to sell the product? Are you able to manage it well? You have to ask the question, are you able to manage it well? Because if you are not able to coordinate and manage this much of products and you're still producing, are they going to do well in the market? Are they going to do well in the market? And when you are kind of doing a lot of production, do you have enough kind of power to manage this production across these countries? This is pretty interesting. Whether it's possible for you to manage this amount of inventories, to manage this amount of production. For example, now I'm in China and producing a lot and putting money, but I'm not able to coordinate where to sell this product, how do I find a distributor, and I don't have enough time to discuss with different partners. Then your product may fail. Your product may be and your business may be chaotic. So pretty be careful about this point. So if we break down, you'll see this question in quiz, I'm kind of giving you the answer already. So if you break down the process, if this is A, which refers to the mismatch that the physical capacity is lower than management capability, and this is B, which is kind of a good point, but hopefully I think the point here is much better. You should have more bit of capability. B is equilibrium point, equal capacity, equal management capability. C is a mismatch that physical capacity, scale and scope, which in terms of how much you are producing, how many areas are you covering, is larger than the management capability. And C is the most risky to collapse. You'll see this question later in the quiz. You'll ask you ABC, which part is the most risky for collapse? The answer is C. So don't get this question wrong, guys. I'm kind of giving you the answer here. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much about part 1. So now we discuss about globalization. Hope you guys understand the processes of pre-entry, entry, post-entry, and exist. Or you can say exist and new. You can either say it to be exist or global restructuring, kind of, or you can say the globalization transition. And this is about part 1. In the next lecture, I'm going to be going through value chain sustainability. So this is about environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and economic sustainability. This is more related to what you learn, maybe a bit in geography or say humanity. So that'll be this one, the supply chain sustainability. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. Value chain sustainability will be one of our last topic for this course. Okay, so thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please comment below. I'm more than happy to answer your queries, and I'll see you in part 2 of the video. Peace.